Casey, you wrote the novel that was adapted into the film Red, White, and Royal Blue, and you also executive produced the film. Well, first off, what inspired you to tell this story? How did you discover these characters?
Oh, I mean, I think it goes back to so many things. I was like a child of the 90s rom-com, like the late 90s rom-com. And so I grew up on like a steady diet of like the Princess Diaries, um, My Date with the President's Daughter, Chasing Liberty, all of these sort of like frothy wish fulfillment rom-coms about these young people in unbelievable circumstances on the world stage and all of the silly things and difficult things that come with being in that role. And so I think I was always fascinated by the archetypes that came from those movies, the rebellious first kid or, the Prince Charming who's like a little more complicated on the inside under the surface. And I just really wanted to explore both of those characters, and I wanted to do it in a way that I hadn't really seen before. And also, just like as a queer person, like I want to make queer art, and that's what I'm drawn to, and that's what I'm interested in. And so I kind of had these two different ideas. It was like one idea was that I would write a book about this rebellious first kid who's like figuring out that they're queer and what does that mean for their like political aspirations. And the other was about, sort of a member of the royal family under all of this pressure to carry on this legacy and like what does that mean if they're gay? And I'm just kind of like weighing these two different stories and deciding where I wanted to go. And then I just kind of had this moment of like, what if I didn't have to choose? And it was the same story because they fall in love with each other. And in a classic bisexual fashion, I was like, I'm gonna have both. So I did.
And when a book is popular, of course, you can usually expect there to be interest in adapting it into a film or a series. Like, when were you first approached to bring this book to the screen? How did that happen?
It was actually unbelievable the way that it happened, and it remains to this day one of the most surreal weeks of my life. Because it was, I want to say March 2019. So the book actually hadn't come out yet. The book wouldn't come out for another 2 months. But like early copies get circulated around producers and writers, and people began to take interest. And I got a call from my agent that there was interest, and then next thing I knew, there was more interest. And so over the span of a week, I had 9 calls with 9 different producers who were all interested in optioning the rights to make a film, which was already blowing my mind. Like nothing like that ever happened to me in my life. It's my debut novel. I'm like new kid on the block, and suddenly I'm talking to, Berlanti Studios. And I really clicked with Berlanti, and then I really clicked with the Amazon team. And I think I've always dreamed of writing a book and having it adapted to a movie. I think anyone that grew up in the era of like, I hate to say it, but the era of Twilight, I think we all, any writer who grew up on that kind of diet dreams of one day having your book adapted to film. And it was just beyond anything I ever could have imagined.
And how much, if any, trepidation is there when you take something that you created and you entrust it to another creator?
It's scary. It really is scary. My agent said something to me very early in the process where she was like, listen, you need to think of this as like a parent trap situation where you have two twins and you get to raise one and the other you're sending off to be raised on another continent. And they're and you're just gonna find out in a few years what they turned out to be, and that's what's gonna happen. And you have to make peace with that. And I did. And I think it was really scary, but it was also like I had the luxury of choice because I had more than one producer who was interested. I had more than one production team. I had more than one studio that was interested. And so I really was spoiled for choice, and I got to choose the people I connected with most on those calls and in those meetings, and the ones that I trusted and the ones who I could tell had the same priorities that I did, in telling the story, which was to like preserve the heart of it and the joy of it and like the triumph of it. Um and so I was really scared, but I was also really reassured that I had made the right choices because I was having all of those conversations. And because I could really feel how deeply each person I spoke to cared about the integrity of what was on the page.
Were there any like assurances you wanted, like certain aspects of the story that you wanted to make sure were honored and translated to the screen?
Yeah, I think like I said, I think the heart of it was one of the biggest things, was like the tone of it, like the way that it had this sort of like cheekiness, but also was really sincere and really earnest and really joyful and really celebratory. I really wanted that to be carried through in the movie. I didn't want it to be mean-spirited. I didn't want it to be overly, sanitized. I wanted characters who acted the way they did in the book, who were smart and sometimes impolite and sometimes messy and ill-guided, but also really passionate and really good. But I also like there were things that were more specific. Like it was really important to me that Alex was explicitly bisexual because I really wanted the representation of of this bisexual character. And then it was important to me that he was also Mexican, like he is in the book, and that he was played by a Mexican actor. And it was really important to me that I didn't want Alex or Henry, no matter how their stories were translated to the screen. I didn't want either of them to have any type of like shame or resentment towards themselves for being queer. It was really important to me that the stakes of their lives and like their inner conflict was much more based on like the circumstances that they're in. It's like if they don't hate themselves for being gay, they just wish, or for being bi, they just wish that it was easier to be who they were in the world that they live in, you know?
And did you have any hand in the screenwriting process? Like, were you able to, did they reach out to you for, guidance or tips or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I got to read some drafts. I got to give my notes on those drafts. And they were very generous about, listening to my notes and about taking my thoughts into account. Um, but at the same time, I was very much like writing books, and I was like, I'm trying to launch this career as an author, so like Godspeed, good luck. I can't wait to read it. Hope it's great. And so I it was like truly a consulting type of role. And then as they went into production, I feel like I got more involved in like more of a granular level, because Matthew would be, every day working on the script or working on props or working on, this is what we're shooting today. And so he would reach out to me and ask me like, well, what should this piece of jewelry that this character wears look like? Can you send me a picture of what you imagine? Or like, what should be the records on Alex's bedroom wall? Can you like send me a list of records that Alex would like? And those are the records that are on the wall in the movie. So I got to be still very involved in making these really important character choices that, might sound small but make a big difference in how the character is being actualized in the movie. So yeah, so I was involved, but I was very thankful that I was able to also like step back and let it happen.
And the lead characters in the film are played by Taylor Zakar Perez and Nicholas Galitzine. How did they compare to the images you had of the characters in your mind when you were writing the novel?
I mean, I will say Taylor's definitely several inches taller than I, which he will be delighted to hear me to know that I said that. Because he's very proud of being tall. But he's much taller than the character I pictured in the book. But other than that, strictly like purely on the level of Alex's energy and Alex's aura and his sort of chaotic nature and his the way he's just like a cannonball, the way that he moves through life. So just unapologetically and sometimes impulsively. I feel like Taylor embodies that so beautifully, and he just does such a great job of packing all of that character into this physical performance, into the looks on his face. I mean, I think he's just killer in that role. And Nick, I mean, I don't like, I feel like Nick just like, if you like turned me upside down and shook me, like he would fall out my brain as Henry. I think just embodies that character so completely, looks like him and then talks like him, and um has like those like the only thing it doesn't have is the blue eyes, but they sure are sad eyes, and that is exactly what they need to be. I think he's he's also so incredibly cast, and then when you put them together, like the alchemy of them is just it's so perfect.
And Matthew Lopez being the director and the co-writer of the script, like what did you think of the way he captured the spirit of the novel in terms of just capturing the tone and the heart of it?
I think he did such a great job. I mean, I think that it is not an easy task to take a book that is that long and try to condense it into not only like a 2 hour movie, but like a 2 hour movie that feels really propulsive and snappy and is getting across as much as you possibly can of this story, and in as much of like an effective and fast paced way, and still make you feel like you understand these characters and you understand what they see in each other and why they would risk so much for each other. So I don't envy the task he had before him, and I think he did such a great job of making really thoughtful choices about how to execute that and where to trim and where to condense and where to combine. And yeah, it could not have been easy, and I applaud him for it.
I'm sure you've been asked before about the possibility of a sequel to this book and potentially the film. But regardless of whether or not that happens, do you keep these characters, or in general, characters you write in your head? Do they kind of live on, and you imagine what they're doing later on after the events of whatever you've written for them?
Oh, they absolutely do. Absolutely. I mean, I think every character that I write has such a huge place in my heart because I spend so much time with them, like from the time that I start drafting and the time I start developing the characters all the way through putting the book out, going on tour. I mean, when I go on a book tour, it's like it's me and it's them, and we are in this together and we're writing this out. And so like they all feel like my kids, like a combination of my kids and like some of my oldest, dearest friends, and so they're always going to live on in my heart. And yeah, I'm always like there's so many times that I'll see something that will remind me of a character, and I'll be like, yeah, somewhere in some universe all these years later this character is eating that Pop Tart, um yeah, truly they live on.
And when you see them coming back up in your life, is that because like there's a little bit of you in every character you write?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think any writer who says there's not some of themselves and at least some of the characters they write is lying. I mean, I've so much of writing for me at least is a lot of it is about like working through things that I see in my life, that I experienced in my life, that inspire me, that are around me. Um, like I feel like there's everything, everything is kind of extracted from somewhere, and so I certainly see myself in a lot of my characters. I see myself in Alex tremendously. I'm very much an Alex, and I relate to him so much. Truly, I think he's the most like me of all my characters.
Red, White, and Royal Blue was your debut novel, as you mentioned. You've already written a couple more books since then, and another one coming out this year, I believe, which is quite a prolific amount of creative output. What's your writing process like?
I mean, I'm I feel like I have to take my time sometimes with these books. Like when I get an idea and I sit down to write something, I really have to like dig in. It has to be like eat, breathe, sleep, this story, these characters. That's just my process. I am like in it. I jokingly call it like in the hole. Like I need to just like go down into my hole with this story and not come out for a while. And so my process is obsession. But actually my process is like every time I feel like I become more and more of an intentional writer. I've always been very much like a plotter, a plan ahead type of writer, but I try to become more and more technical with my prep for each book every time. Um, and and then I think from there I'm just chasing what I want to read and what is fun to write. And that is the ultimate privilege of writing romance is I think it is the most fun genre to write. I don't I am sure that like thriller writers will say that about thrillers, and mystery writers will say that about mystery. But to me, I mean, there's just nothing like writing romance. It is, I feel incredibly lucky to get to do that as my job.
If you weren't writing romances, are there any other genres that you might have dipped your toe into or still might?
I mean, look, I'm a sucker for fantasy. I love a good fantasy novel. I'm like, I was a huge Tolkien kid. I absolutely love Tolkien. And so I think if it wasn't romance, and maybe I still could find my way over to fantasy one day.
Now that your work has been adapted into film, is screenwriting something that you've ever considered, or do you consider yourself strictly prose?
No, I mean, I think books are my home that I will always come back to, but I'm very interested in screenwriting. And I very much would love screenwriting to become part of what I do. I'll say it that way.
Congratulations on the book, on every book that's followed, on the adaptation, and everything you've got coming up. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Daniel.